हाँ जी, अस्सलाम वालेकुम रहमतुल्लाह। सॉरी बच्चों for being late today. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum once again for those of you who have just joined. Okay. चलें जी, चलें जी. Okay, चलें जी. Hadiya, both the Hadiyas and Niyaz are here. Okay, good. मेरे मैसेज से आज कहीं ये तो नहीं लग गया बच्चों को क्लास नहीं है, only 3 of us. चलें कोई बात नहीं. The others will join in. Okay बच्चों, thank you for waiting for 10 minutes. असल में आज मैंने लंच किया हुआ था तकरीबन 11:45 in the morning और I didn't get chance to eat the entire day. I was super hungry, so I wanted to fill in my belly before filling in your heads with ecology. Okay, a very quick word. मैंने recording अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह wind up कर ली है, उसको मैं अभी क्लास के बाद आप लोगों के साथ वी ट्रांसफर से ही शेयर करूँगा. So I would want you guys to, do the. Let me change my connection. Right. So I would want you to, download that inshallah recording. It's a 45-minute recording. वो lesson पूरा हो गया था, उसके past papers भी और उसके MCQs भी. ठीक है? तो notes मैंने आपको भेज दिए थे, inshallah. So you will make more sense of the notes once you look at the videos, inshallah. ठीक है, चलें जी, आज हम inshallah अपना नया topic शुरू कर रहे हैं. And that new topic is ecology. That's not the name of the topic. Unlike some other topics, for this topic I have the presentation ready. Okay, so let's. बच्चों मेरी आवाज आ रही है आप लोगों को clear? कोई हाँ yes no
Yes.
करने?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Okay. चलें जी, so I have this thing ready with me. PDF में नहीं किया हुआ. चलो PDF पे करके इसको डालते हैं अपने OneNote पे ताकि डायरेक्टली वहीं पे हम इसके नोट्स वगैरह ले लें. अच्छा जी, the name of the topic is not ecology. I've just named the topic ecology just for the sake of easiness and clarity, but that's not the name. The name is actually quite big. मैं यहाँ पे लिख देता हूँ ecology, but that's not the name. Okay. The name is the following: relationship of organisms with one another and the environment. It's quite a big name, but this is the first thing that I will be talking about today because we need to make sense of this name. The entire topic, if you like, revolves around the same name. Okay, so that's the PDF. Okay, great. Chale ji. So, looking at the name, come on, be quick. Okay. Okay, so there is the name. The relationship of organisms with one another and the environment. देखिए बच्चों, to set the context, you need to understand that so far we have been looking at organism in isolation. ठीक है? We've been talking about different systems, nervous system, breathing system, circulatory system, digestive system. But and here we are going to extend beyond this idea. जरा ग्रुप में मैसेज कर दूं कि प्लीज ज्वाइन, ताकि अगर किसी को ये लग रहा है कि क्लास नहीं है तो ऐसी बात नहीं है. Okay, चलें. Anyhow, so in this topic we will see how organisms, they are related to other organisms. अब ये related कोई first cousin या second cousin वाला relation नहीं है, मैं आपको बताऊंगा ये क्या relation है. And also how they are related to their environment. So that's the crux of the matter that we are going to talk about in detail. So it's not only the organism in isolation that we're looking at, but instead it's a relation. Now, what exactly do I mean by the word relation. That's what we're going to talk about in this topic anyway. Okay, so now there are some key definitions that we need to talk about. Okay, excuse me. This topic, ecology, has a lot of definitions. Okay, you don't quite often find the past papers filled with definition, and neither are all of the definitions in our syllabus. But just to put things in perspective, I've made sure that I stick to the definitions that is according to the specification or the syllabus itself. So you can see that I have one, two, and three ideas or definitions that you like if we need to understand. So let's look at the first one, population. Population is a group of organisms of one species living in the same area at the same time. Okay, let me give you an example. School में, in your school is a specific area, and you are in a specific time frame, and you have a population of, हाँ जी, इंसानों की population या बच्चों क्या ख्याल? You have a population of humans, right? So if you look at this picture, and if I were to ask you, what does this picture represent? This picture represents population. So, what do I mean by population? All of them have one thing in common, and that is all of them are humans. Okay. So, population basically means all the organisms of the same species, in this case, it's humans, living in a specific area in a specific time. Okay, that is what is known as population. As you can see also in the definition, a group of organisms of one species, that's the condition. Okay, of one species living in the same area. ओके आई अपोलोजाइज मैंने कनेक्शन चेंज किया अपना आज कुछ हवा की वजह से मेरा स्टॉर्म फाइबर मसला कर रहा है सो पीटीसीएल जिंदाबाद ऑलराइट कैन यू हियर मी अगेन
Yes.
हेलो
Yeah.
ओके ग्रेट चलिए जी so I was talking about this picture and we know that this is population now if I extend the idea beyond population. This picture is all about what a community is supposed to be. I know the picture looks quite absurd and childish, but it really helps us to understand. आप देखिए कि यहाँ पे you have a tree, you have trees. Okay, they are plants, they're living organisms at the end of the day. You've got rabbits, and you've got birds, you've got snakes. और ये क्या है? Yeah, I don't know, fox maybe. Okay, let's say they're fox. These are snakes. They look very happy, and these are birds. So, just by looking at this diagram, I want you to think and maybe come up with a possible definition, if you like, of community. So, population was just one group of species. You can see that community is one step ahead. Okay. So, if I were to go back to the definition that we saw earlier, that is community is all of the populations of different species in an ecosystem. Okay, so all of the populations, and all of the populations will include the plant population and the human and the animal, and all of them literally all of them. Okay, and then you have this big idea of what is known as the ecosystem. So the third definition, if you like, is ecosystem, which means it's a unit containing all of the organisms and their environment interacting together. Now, I will extend this definition in an easy way. It's a unit containing all of the organisms interacting with their biotic and abiotic factors. I'm sure this word is nothing new for you, but biotic basically means living, like other animals, other plants. But what does abiotic mean?
Non-living things, just rocks and stuff.
So, like air, rock, light, etc. The non-living things, okay? Even the non-living things, they do interact, okay? So, ecosystem is a unit that contains all of the organisms interacting with their biotic and abiotic uh, factors. Okay, so that's the idea of ecosystem. All right. And of course, giving you the very big picture. Of course, this picture has some stuff which we may not, should not be talking about. But if you think about it, we've done levels of organization, काफी दफा हमने किया. So, of course, in levels of organization, we start from cell. But even if you go beyond, below cell, you have organelles, molecules, and atoms. So, actually, the story begins with the subatomic particles, electrons, protons, neutrons, and then we extend the idea at the cellular level, and then we know from cells we transition into tissues, organs, organ system, and then in organism. So this is the point at which we had usually stopped before studying this topic. Now we are extending beyond this. So we know that if there are many organisms living in an area, that's population. And then you don't need to know this biocensus. Ecosystem, you can clearly see that this diagram has the living things, the mountains, and all of that stuff. That's both biotic and abiotic. और फिर उससे आगे idea भी extend होता है, but again, I just want you to stick to ecosystem. ठीक है बच्चों, is everybody with me so far?
Yes.
Okay, great. चलें जी, अब आगे चलते हैं. Again, this is a good picture that is showing you the idea of an ecosystem. Very clearly, can you identify the biotic factors for me in this diagram? So that's biotic.
The rabbit and the tree.
Rabbit.
The plants and देखो ना उसने living को highlight किया हुआ है. ये भी plants भी biotic हैं. And then the non-living, you can see the rocks, the soil, the water, the air, and the light, all of them are abiotic. Okay, they're not living. Again, this is also a picture which shows you how the ecosystem works. You can see water, plants, animals, and all of that stuff. Okay, and there are some words that I'm sure you know already. Habitat is basically the place where organisms they live. Okay, organisms live. I've made a list of some definitions, but really you don't need them as such. It's just that we need to understand the following words. Again, I've reiterated these definitions. Again, it's the same slide that you saw above. चलिए जी, अब हम आते हैं on our next and a very basic but yet a very important idea in this topic, and that is food chains. Now, look, coming back to the name of the topic, if you remember, मैंने आपसे कहा था, we will be looking at the way how organisms they interact with other organisms and with their environment. Okay, this is what I said. Now, when we are talking about relationship, it's the relationship at the end of the day boils down to energy. How is energy being transferred from one organism to the other? Why is that even needed? Well, because you have feeding relationships and all of that stuff. So, what is a food chain? I just want you to ignore this technical definition for a moment and look at the diagram. Okay, you can see some plants, then you can see an arrow to the grasshopper, and then again you can see a arrow to this flycatcher. Just forget about the primary, consumer, producer, seducer, all of that stuff. Let's boil it down to very simple basics. What it means is that the grass is being eaten by the grasshopper, and the grasshopper is being eaten by the flycatcher. There is a potential confusion that can be created. Okay, grass eats grasshopper and grasshopper eats flycatcher. If you simply follow the arrows, that's an incorrect understanding. Okay, so सिर्फ समझने के लिए आप, if you do get confused in this confusion that I've just stated, then you can translate the arrow as eaten by, although the arrow does not represent eaten by. I mean, it does indirectly, but you don't say that. I'm just telling you for you to remember this, okay? So, but the arrows, they actually represent and this is very important, energy transfer between organisms. Okay. Now, what do I mean when I say energy is transferred between organisms? Well, if grasshopper is eating grass, then that means that energy that was in the grass is coming to the grasshopper. Okay. But the question is, where is the energy coming to the plants in the first place? And you have to relate this to your topic that you studied for plant nutrition. Okay. Everybody knows, but what is the name of the process by which plants make their own food?
Photosynthesis.
That's photosynthesis, exactly. And we know that the light energy from the sun is converted into the carbohydrates, which is a chemical store of energy. And then the energy is transferred as one organism eats the other. Now, let me read the definition or explanation, if you like, of the food chain. And you need to know this, of course, that's why I have it on the slide. So, food chain is a sequence of organisms starting with a photosynthesizing organism. Now, you have to remember that the initial part of the food chain, that's always going to be the plants, okay, or the photosynthesizing organism, that's usually plants. They are known as producers. What are they producing, and why are we calling them producers? Not because they're producing energy, no, they're trapping energy from the sunlight, but they're producing their own food. And that's by convention, we call them as producers for the reason that they're making their own food. Okay. All right. So let me continue reading it again. Food chain is a sequence of organisms starting with a photosynthesizing organism, usually a green plant, through which energy is passed as one organism is eaten by next in the sequence. Food chain shows energy transfer from one organism to the next. There's only one organism at each trophic level. आप बिल्कुल ऐसे समझें कि sun है, sun से हमें पता है कि light energy trap होती है, and then there's this organism A, then you have organism B, then you have organism C. So this is the food chain. Now, I will make two statements and I will pinpoint a apparent and apparent contradiction, and I want you guys to answer that contradiction for me. Okay, so listen to me carefully. The first sentence that I will say is that the energy is coming from the sun. And by the way, हम sun को कहते हैं, it's the primary source of energy input in all biological systems. बच्चों आपने geography में पढ़ा ना, renewable and non-renewable sources of energy? Yes, you've studied that already?
Yeah. In physics as well.
Okay, physics as well. Good. So what do you think is sun to be categorized in? Renewable or non-renewable?
Renewable solar panels.
Renewable. Excellent. Okay, so the first statement that I'm making is, and tell me if you agree or disagree. Light energy is trapped by the producers, it's converted into chemical energy, and along the food chain, as organisms eat one another, this energy is transferred one after the other. क्या ख्याल है? Does this make sense? ऐसे ही
Yeah,
होता है
that's
ना?
true.
Yeah, that's true. So energy, light, which form of energy is being captured by the plants? It's light energy, and it's being converted into chemical energy. And then when B consumes A, and some energy is transferred. Why am I saying some energy is transferred? I'll just explain that. And then when B is eaten by C, some energy is transferred. Okay, now my question is, if that is the case, then why don't we include the sun in the food chain? I mean, it's the energy is coming from the sun and the arrows are representing energy transfer. Then why don't we include the sun in the food chain? जी बच्चों.
Because it's renewable.
Well, what is the name of the food chain? Do you mind saying it out loud again, Hadia? That was you.
Mm, Food chain is a sequence of organisms directly linked to the
Food chain, है ना? It's a food chain. It's a chain that represents feeding and eating. We're not
Oh,
eating the sun, right? So no doubt that food chain, the arrows in the food chain represent energy transfer, but they are supposed to start with the plant by definition. Okay. So ये एक बड़ा subtle सा point है, लेकिन इसको याद रखें. This is not a rocket science. This is easy to understand. Okay. चलें जी, एग्जाम स्टाइल क्वेश्चन पे आ जाते हैं जी. हम फौरन से पहले देखें, इतने खूबसूरत सा आउल है, बिल्कुल आपकी तरफ देख रहा है कि कितनी मेहनत कर रहे हैं आजकल बच्चे. माशाल्लाह कैम्ब्रिज के एग्जाम्स बिल्कुल सर पे आ गए हैं. खैर, एनी हाउ, so just ignore the owl. So it says figure 4.1 shows the organisms in a woodland food chain. The number written below each organism show the relative amount of energy at each trophic level in the food chain. Okay, what is trophic level? I should have mentioned this earlier. बच्चों, आप मेरे घर में एक बेसमेंट है, फिर एक ग्राउंड फ्लोर है और एक फर्स्ट फ्लोर है. मैं बेसमेंट को बेसमेंट क्यों कहता हूँ, नीचे वाली जगह क्यों नहीं कहता? और व्हाई डोंट आई से द ग्राउंड फ्लोर एज बीच वाली जगह, एंड व्हाई डोंट आई से द फर्स्ट फ्लोर एज ऊपर वाली जगह? Does anybody has an answer to this? Why do I call the
Yeah.
basement as basement? Okay, what's the answer, Niaz?
So you have to give them like a specific number to define them. Same in the food chain, like
Yeah, I
1, 2,
mean,
3.
exactly. No, in the context of the example that I'm telling, I mean, I call the basement as the basement because that's what it's called. Okay, it's a level. So basement is never going to be on the top, is it? कभी आपने सुना है basement third floor पे? That's absurd. Okay, that sounds incorrect. So when we're talking about food chain, there are levels that we are talking about. So the first level is the level of the plants, and then the organism that eats plant, and then the organism that eats that organism. And also, there's also one thing I should have mentioned also. Look at this diagram. The insect or the animal that is consuming the producers is known as primary consumer. Remember, every organism after the producers in the food chain is a consumer. Why is it a consumer? Because it is consuming some organism. Okay. And of course, the flycatcher happens to be the secondary consumer. And this thing can go on, and it depends on how long the food chain is. Okay. So trophic level की मैं बात कर रहा था. Trophic level is basically you give number, you know, to each feeding level. So trophic, the word trophic basically has to do with feeding. So it's feeding levels basically. Trophic 1, trophic level 2, trophic level 3. जिसमें 3 organisms हैं, there are 3 trophic levels. So let me read the question again now. Figure 4.1 shows the organisms in a woodland food chain. The numbers written below each organism show the relative amount of energy at each trophic level in the food chain. State what the arrows in figure 4.1 represent. Hanji bachcho, what do they represent?
energy.
Shabash, they represent energy transfer. Okay. The second part is suggest. Okay, it's a suggestion and it's a 1-mark suggestion. Why the arrows are of different sizes? देखिए, मैंने आपको बताया था कि some energy is transferred and not all of is. So for example, the caterpillar eats the tree. So not all the energy from the tree enters the caterpillar, does it? I mean, that even sounds incorrect. So where does the energy go? You know, it's almost 90% of energy that is lost at each trophic level. Where does this energy go? We will talk about this in a minute, but suggest why the arrows are of different sizes. Why are they of different sizes? Because energy is lost at each trophic level. Lost at each trophic level. ठीक हो गया? Okay. State the amount of energy that passes from the producers. Bachcho, what is the producer in this diagram? That's the producer. So it says state the amount of energy that passes from the producers to the first consumer. Total energy oak tree में कितनी है? 100,000. What is being passed on to the producer, to the first? What is the first consumer here?
The caterpillars.
Caterpillar.
The caterpillar, because of the first or the primary consumer is the one that is consuming the plant. So arrow के आगे क्या number लिखा है? 10,000. What that shows is that out of 100,000, it's only 10,000 that is being transferred. Where does the rest of the 90,000 kilojoules go? 90,000 is lost. Where does it get lost? Just don't worry, we'll talk about that. So what's the amount of energy that passes, बच्चों? 10,000. ठीक है? Name two carnivores. What? Okay, another terminology. असल में मैंने आपको अलग से terminologies नहीं करवाई because जैसे जैसे वो साथ साथ आती जाएंगी मैं आपको बताऊंगा. What are carnivores? Animal eaters. Animal eaters. Yeah, non-veg if you like, non-veg eaters. So look at this diagram and name two carnivores. Which organisms are consuming animals or insects or mammals and not plants? जी बच्चों, caterpillar, is that a carnivore?
The
Is cat?
robin
Yeah,
and
देखिए,
owls and
robins and owls, that's correct. Why is caterpillar not a carnivore? Because it's consuming plant, it's consuming the tree. That's why we don't qualify. What is the name given to plant eaters only? Anybody knows?
herbivore.
Shabash, excellent. Herbivores. Or what is the name given to both plant and animal eaters?
Omnivores.
Omnivores. Okay. Challenging. All right. Only 10% of the energy in the robins passes to the owl. Describe what happens to the 90% of energy. It is lost. इसकी detail हम अभी आगे करेंगे, इसलिए इस question को फिलहाल मैं यहीं पे छोड़ रहा हूँ. And let's move further ahead. Now, this is an extended idea of, अच्छा जी हम we are 30 minutes into our lesson. बच्चों मुझे बताएं कि आज हम 9-10 तक लेसन को एक्सटेंड कर लें. किसी को कोई क्लास तो नहीं है आगे? और आदिया कहीं हो?
कल मॉक है फिर से.
ओहो, इतने देखें
बस
मुझे आप.
empty.
अच्छा चलें, ओके. मॉक है तो रहम खा लेते हैं हम थोड़ा सा. कितने डेडिकेटेड हैं आप लोग, देखें माशाल्लाह कि आप लोग फिर भी पढ़ रहे हैं, ये तो बड़ी अच्छी बात है. चलें, एनी हाउ, इंशाल्लाह I'll pray, I'll make a special prayer, I promise, इंशाल्लाह. तक वो सियासी दुआ नहीं करूँगा मैं, यकीन करें कि जो है ना आप लोगों के लिए खुसूसी दुआ करूँगा कि अल्लाह हेल्प यू इन योर Cambridge exams and also your mock exams. Okay, so what is this diagram? Can anybody tell me?
It's a food web.
Okay, that's a food web. What is a food web?
Many food chains.
Many interlinked food chains. Many interlinked food chains. Okay. Acha, now, if I was food chains, sorry. Chains लिख दिया है, chains लिखता था. Chains. Okay. So if I were to identify one food chain, the grass, the rabbit, and the stoat. ठीक है, लेकिन आप देखें कि एक और food chain है, the grass, the rat, and the stoat. I've identified two food chains for you, and you can see that there are organisms which are in more than one food chain. Okay, rat को देखें, वो तो काफी food chains में है. So this is basically, in an ideal, in a practical situation, in an ecosystem, there will not only be one food chain. Okay, there is going to be a combination of many interlinked food chains, and you will always practically talk about food web. Okay. Now, from the exam perspective, what do you need to know about food webs? Inshallah, I think let's, okay, let's take a traditional 1 minute break. We're 30 minutes into the lesson. मैं इंशाल्लाह जो है वो 9 or 5 तक extend करूँगा. I'm sorry I started my class late today. As I said, I was feeling terribly hungry. I had to eat dinner before I had to take the class. So let's take a 1 minute break very quickly. Time भी खत्म होने वाला है Zoom का, तो फिर हम इसको resume करते हैं and then let's finish off at 9 or 5 इंशाल्लाह. जज़ाकल्लाह खैर बच्चों.